First of all, I'd like to say that I'm absolutely positively impressed by the openness with which many unionists yesterday and obviously also today speak out against war, and this not just in a very abstract sense, like we are all in favor of peace, but making it very clear that troops have to be withdrawn from, like Afghanistan. And the country where I come from, Germany, you wouldn't hear that from union panels like this one. You would find many rank and file activists and also union officials being very involved with the peace movement, but you would never get this kind of official statement from unions speaking out against war in such a clear manner, saying withdraw troops from Afghanistan. And actually it's not just Canadian troops in Afghanistan, it's also German troops and from many another European country. I was pleased to hear that some of you yesterday made it very clear that there is a myth in Canada that Canada is a peacekeeping country, rather different from US foreign policies, but that they would be kind of part of the gang suppressing other countries, especially in the global south. And this is actually quite similar in Europe. There also is a myth that Europe is much more peaceful than the US. What is true whatsoever is that they have less weapons. But this does not mean that without help from Europe, the US could do all the things that they actually do. And in that sense, it is kind of a little bit dangerous or not taking on the issues as they come, because when you say, look, our foreign policies are much more peaceful than theirs are, then this also implies that there's not so much need for mobilizing for peace or to stop war, actually. And a clear example of this is the position of the then Social Democratic government of Germany took on the war on Iraq, then just in terms to be re-elected. And here again we have an analogy with Canada, when Jean Chrétien said, no, in this war against Iraq we won't be involved because I want to make it easier for Paul Martin to become Prime Minister of Canada. Gerhard Schröder in a similar way thought, oh, obviously there's an anti-war sentiment in my country at this point, so I better speak out against the war on Iraq. This will help me to be re-elected, and actually he was re-elected. But what he didn't mention during his election campaign was that at the same time more troops were sent, German troops, to Afghanistan to help the US having troops available to do the job, so-called job, to accomplish a mission in Iraq. And when you look at the unions, they were strongly against the war on Iraq, not so strongly against the war on Afghanistan. And this brings me to my next point, which actually is the long-standing relationship between trade unions and social democracy. For a long time there was a clearly established division of labor. When it comes to collective bargaining, this is a union job. When it comes to politics, this is the job of social democratic parties of all sorts. In some countries they even are called socialist parties, but in a way they're all social democratic parties. And they have there were times when social democracy was rather different than it is now. The older ones among you might remember the 70s, when European Social Democrats were launching something which was called the North-South Commission, and they were proposing to introduce a new international economic order which would be more equitable than the globalized world that we see these days. Unfortunately, this current within social democracy, which was pro a more just international economic order and also pro welfare state, was step by step at different times in different countries, European countries, replaced by third-way social democracy, which more and more took the position that yeah, still we have a European social model, but under the pressures of global competition, maybe we can't really afford the social standards that we had until now, and that therefore we might have to lower them to compete with others. But speaking about social democracy and foreign policies, the most drastic example probably here is Britain. Tony Blair made it very clear that once you call imperialist invasions humanitarian intervention, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with being engaged with that. And the Labour Prime Minister of Britain never had any difficulty making friends with the Republican George Bush when it came to preparing the war on Iraq. And this actually led to some confusion within unions. Some thought, yeah, but still, somehow Labour is different than the Conservatives would be, which might be the case or might not be the case. But in any case, what came out of that was that the political representation of unions kind of vanished away in the mainstream of bringing free market economies and supposedly even democracy to other countries by way of invading them. And this actually created a lack of kind of the political clout of unions in all European countries. Yes, it's nice to be in favor of activism, going to rallies, being in favor of direct action, but for the time being we have representative democracy, which is not the worst thing you can have in the political arena. So there's still the question, or there now really is the question, what to do about electoral politics. Shall we just give up on third-way social democracy? Shall we, as unionists, try to reclaim social democracy? Or shall we actually try to build new, more union-oriented political parties than social democracy is able to be these days? And in a number of countries, again, probably the most prominent example here is Britain. There are such parties, pretty weak at this point. Nobody knows where this is going to end. And the last, it's not really a question, it really is a problem. Sometimes among activists you have the notion, unions, you know, they are all bureaucracies and not very much is going on there. And there is good reason for this kind of criticism. However, there's unfortunately also good reason to be critical about social movements. We have seen major mobilizations, particularly against the war on Iraq. Maybe some of you remember pictures. There were millions marching in Rome, millions in a couple of Spanish cities, millions in France, hundreds of thousands of people in London, the biggest demonstrations ever, bigger than the mobilizations against the Vietnam War, and also hundreds of thousands of people marching through different cities of Germany. However, these movements kind of come and go. There is not really something like continuity on the side of social movements. So therefore, waiting for the movements to revive the labor movement is something where we might have to wait quite a long time. So what we actually need when we want to bring together the labor movement and the peace movement, obviously, is not starting from scratch, but reviving both sides of it. If labor is waiting for the social movements, that, as I just said, might take quite a while, and also the other way around. So obviously both sides have to be more active than they have in the past, but I think this forum is a particularly good starting point for that kind of activity. And when we will have a follow-up meeting at any point in time, I'm very optimistic that then we will have a good deal of experience with much more successful mobilizations. Thank you very much.